Hello, boring people. Tonight we sail into freezing fog, drift beside howling glaciers, and snooze our way straight into the weird world of Viking dentistry, except not the kind with minty rinses and awkward elevator music. No, you're going to learn all about how burly Norse warriors laid back, opened wide, and had tiny little grooves carved into their actual teeth, with soot and needles and absolutely no anesthetic. You probably won't survive this. So before you jump into this boring and sleepy story, please take a moment to like my videos and subscribe to my channel, but only if you actually enjoy and feel comfortable with the stories I tell here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is there. I'll try not to judge you if it's 3 a.m. and you've been doom scrolling for hours. Now lie down and relax. Turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soothing noise, and let's start our boring journey together tonight. You wake on a longship. Not the Hollywood kind with dragon heads and perfect CGI waves, but a damp, creaky wooden thing that smells deeply of fish and wet wool. The fog is so thick it clings to your beard like spider silk. You feel the cold not just on your skin, but behind your eyeballs. The oars slap the water with sleepy rhythm, and the sail above you snaps gently like a sigh. Beside you, someone stirs under fur. He's missing half a tooth. It's not knocked out, it's carved clean, like someone took a tiny chisel and etched a line through the enamel. Which is weird, because nobody here's smiling much. That's when you realize a few of your shipmates have grooved teeth, and they're proud of it. You spot a wiry man grinning at a joke you don't hear, Vosh revealing 4 straight teeth each with 2 dark lines running vertically, etched perfectly like runes or tally marks. You assume it's dirt until he pulls out a scrap of polished metal and inspects his grin, admiring it like it's jewelry. The ship rocks. Someone vomits fish. A gull lands, looks you dead in the eye, and steals half a herring off your boot. There's no real destination being discussed aloud, but the general mood is raiding-ish, or maybe trading, or something that involves shouting at monks. You're not exactly sure why you signed up for this. Maybe for the fame, maybe for the mead, but you didn't expect to have to think about what your teeth looked like. By mid-morning, the fog clears, and you dock beside a jagged shoreline studded with black stone and seabird nests. The beach crunches underfoot. It's not sand, but broken shell and bone. Welcome to somewhere vaguely Scandinavia adjacent. Nobody's carved a welcome sign in runes yet. You're hungry. Breakfast is hard rye bread and cold fish. The bread chips your molars a bit and the fish tastes like sadness, but no one complains. It's here, sitting by a fire built from driftwood and ship splinters, that you notice something strange. A man across the fire pulls a pouch from his belt. No gold coins, no weapons. Just a handful of sharp bone-colored tools. He lays them out on a flat stone like he's setting up for surgery. You lean in. A thin, curved needle, a smooth piece of antler, a sliver of iron, a tiny file, possibly made from the spine of something recently alive. He catches your gaze and grins. Again, those teeth. Clean lines, symmetrical, purposeful, like someone drew with ink. Except it's not ink. It's soot, mixed with spit, pressed into tiny grooves. Welcome to Viking tooth carving. Historians still argue whether this was a widespread tradition or the odd hobby of a few northern weirdos. But we know from skeletal remains, especially from Swedish sites like Birka, that some Viking-age folks did carve lines and patterns into their front teeth. And not just 1 or 2. We're talking up to 10 carved teeth per person, sometimes in matching formations. These weren't casual scratches from a wild night out. They were deliberate. They were careful. They were art. You wonder what would possess someone to do this. Vanity, pain tolerance contests, secret language, theories vary. Maybe it was meant to intimidate. or identify you. Or maybe, like most weird trends, someone popular did it once and everyone else said, "Hey, me too." The man with the tools, who you've now mentally nicknamed Tooth Guy, beckons you closer. "First time?" he asks, gently tapping a wooden needle on the firestone. You nod. "I can tell," he adds, looking at your mouth like a blank canvas. Before you can back away, someone else claps you on the back. "Don't worry, you only scream for the first one." As the sun sets, you're seated on a fur-covered log, chewing nervously on a stick of pine resin to clean your mouth. Your breath smells like tree sap and despair. Tooth Guy sterilizes his tool in flame, which feels optimistic, and begins humming a tune that suspiciously sounds like an early version of elevator music, if the elevator was descending into hell. You close your eyes. The wind sighs. Somewhere in the distance, a reindeer sneezes, and then the carving begins. A sharp poke, a scraping sensation, a grind. It's not agony exactly. It's more like someone dragging a tiny rake across your nerve endings. There's blood, but not too much. Mostly there's pressure, and the weirdest part, it tickles. You almost laugh mid-slice. Tooth Guy leans back, one down. You open your mouth. A groove has been etched dead center on one of your top teeth. He dabs a soot mixture into it using a crow feather. You taste fire and charcoal and something vaguely mushroomy. The feather tickles your tongue. "Don't lick it," he warns. Too late. Someone plays a low note on a bone flute, probably to be dramatic. Someone else offers you fermented fish as a reward. You decline with your eyes. Your teeth hurt. But you're part of the club now. Carved, branded, etched. Whatever this is, you're in. And the night, it stretches endlessly, starless and wide, waiting for the next sharp scratch. Morning comes far too quickly. Your jaw throbs like a tiny drummer is trapped in your gums, keeping beat with every heartbeat. You try to swallow, but even that feels like dragging gravel over your teeth. Congratulations, you survived your first Viking tooth carving. Probably. The camp is already stirring. Smoke curls lazily from breakfast fires, and the salty wind is back, rattling every loose object with annoying persistence. You shift under your stiff wool blanket and notice a strange grit in your mouth. Soot residue. Charcoal spit. You rinse with some watered-down mead and try not to think about hygiene. No toothbrushes here, just chewing sticks, pine resin, and if you're fancy, a fish scale scraper. You wander toward the fire pit, your carved tooth still raw. Others sit chewing noisily on dried lamb strips and cold porridge. Tooth Guy is already at work again, sharpening his bone needle with a stone and humming that hauntingly awful tune. He's been up since before dawn, probably etching dreams onto someone else's incisors. You sit beside a broad-shouldered warrior. Ulf, you think his name is. He's halfway through carving his 7th tooth. "You get used to the sting," he says with a grin full of blackened grooves. After the 3rd one, your mouth goes numb, or your brain does. Either way, it's easier. You ask why he started. He shrugs, mouth full. "Same reason we braid our beards and wear sealskin cloaks. Looks good, feels powerful." "Even if it hurts," he snorts. "Everything good hurts." Mainstream historians will tell you Viking culture was steeped in displays of strength and resilience. From duels to frost swimming to open flame tattoos, pain was often a gateway to identity. So carving one's teeth, in a way it fits perfectly. But what's odd, and oddly gentle, almost poetic, is how precise it all is. This isn't someone smashing your teeth in with a hammer for honor. It's delicate, patient, like embroidery for your enamel. As you eat, you notice Tooth Guy talking with another man over the tools. They're debating bone versus iron for the needles. Iron stays sharper longer, but bone is gentler. Apparently, mammoth ivory is best, but good luck finding one of those these days. Someone says they once used raven quills to apply soot. Someone else claims they used porcupine spines for the finer detailing. Porcupines in Scandinavia? Historians still argue whether Viking trade routes were that weird. What they do agree on: most of these tooth carvings come from 10th to 11th century Sweden, especially in coastal trading towns. Skulls unearthed in burial mounds show not just grooves, but uniformity, suggesting trained hands, practiced artisans, and maybe even some kind of traveling tooth carver trade. You imagine a lone Viking wandering from camp to camp, rolling up his seal leather kit and saying, "Who's next?" The fire crackles. Ulf belches. A child nearby mimics his tooth grin with a carved stick in their mouth, pretending. Apparently, even Viking kids played dentist. Tooth guy finally sits beside you. He slides a flat bone across your lap, his breakfast. Flatbread smeared with rancid butter and what might be bear fat. You pretend to nibble politely. He pulls out his pouch. Want to see the rest? You nod. He lays out the full set. About 8 tools total, some for scraping, some for scoring. One is shaped like a tiny rake. Another looks like a flattened fish hook. You ask where he got them. Made them, he says. Took a week. Most of it just getting the soot right. Not too fine or it fades. Too thick and it infects. A third man leans in. You can boil it with birch bark. That makes it cleaner. Tooth guy scoffs. Boiling ruins the binding. I mix mine with pig's blood. Thicker. You decide not to ask what happens if it goes wrong. But tooth guy volunteers anyway. Last winter, tried a new soot mix. Too coarse. Cracked a guy's tooth clean in two. Looked like a split log. He chuckles as though that's adorable. You wonder whether this counts as a medical profession. Some historians say maybe these carvers were early dentists. Others point out that no medical texts from the Viking world mention carving teeth. No runes, no records, just evidence in skulls. Silent proof. The most awkward kind. You're not even sure if this practice had a name. It might have been part of ritual or fashion or combat identity. Or maybe it was just a Tuesday thing. Either way, your carved tooth is beginning to feel less sore and more important, like a badge, a story on your face. You rub your tongue across the groove and feel it catching slightly. Permanent. The sky brightens into a rare patch of blue. The boats are being restocked. Some say you'll sail south soon, to Francia, or maybe to a monastery that has an awkward habit of catching fire when Vikings arrive. But for now, you have one carved tooth, one line of soot, and the growing realization that you might want another. Before the fire dies, someone starts carving again. You watch, mesmerized, as soot-darkened grooves bloom across a smiling jaw like a tiny runestone. It's oddly peaceful, almost meditative. Who knew dental mutilation could be so zen? A boy beside you pokes at the soot mix and asks, "Does it taste like dragon ash?" "No," says Tooth Guy. "More like burnt goat." He's not wrong. You spend the next few hours squinting into a shard of polished iron, examining your mouth like it's suddenly become the most interesting part of your body. The groove in your tooth looks simple enough, just a clean black line right down the center, but somehow it changes your whole face. You tilt your head this way and that, catching the pale morning light. One line, permanent, quietly intimidating. You're not alone. Across the camp, others are doing the same, grinning into reflective surfaces, flexing their jawlines, testing how their carvings look when they frown. It's not vanity exactly. It's branding. Because here's the truth. In a world without selfies, Instagram, or even mirrors that don't double as weapons, your teeth are prime real estate, front and center, unmissable when you talk or snarl or scream into battle. So why not decorate them? Tooth Guy strolls past and nods approvingly at your groove. "Good line," he mutters. "You've got good enamel. That helps." Apparently not everyone does. Some folks' teeth flake, Some grooves don't hold the soot, others develop tiny cracks, battle scars of the mouth. You're told one poor lad sneezed mid-carving and ended up with looked like a lightning bolt. Cool in theory, but he wasn't thrilled about it. You wander over to the carving station, a simple bench by the fire, covered in soot pots, bone tools, and a bloody cloth or two. It's organized in that chaotic artisan way, like a painter's corner or a tattooist's kit after a long night, except it smells more like burnt antler and fermented fish. Tooth Guy is working on someone else now, a young woman with hair braided so tight her scalp probably sings lullabies at night. She's getting 2 short grooves on each canine. They almost look like animal fangs. New trend, someone whispers beside you. Tooth fangs, all the rage in Hedeby. Ah, the Hedeby look. The Viking equivalent of a fashion capital. You half expect someone to say, "Oh, this? It's local enamel, from Denmark." One of the more bizarre things about these tooth carvings is how few people talk about them in surviving sagas. You'd think someone would mention it, Thorvald the Tooth-Marked or Inga of the Inked Bite. But the old tales are strangely quiet, which of course has led to endless historical debate. Some scholars argue this was a fringe practice, maybe limited to a single tribe or region. Others insist it was more widespread, but intentionally kept out of written lore, possibly because it had religious or magical undertones. Or maybe, as one academic once phrased it, people didn't write poems about their dentist. Regardless, you're starting to notice a pattern. Most of the carved teeth seem to follow a logic. Straight vertical grooves on the front incisors, sometimes symmetrical, sometimes slightly offset, never random. Tooth Guy finally explains, front teeth are the easiest, flattest surface, good visibility. You nod as though this is obvious. But molars, he continues, that's expert level, curved, hard to reach, risk of cracking. You shudder at the thought. Grooving a molar sounds like trying to chisel a design into a slippery rock while blindfolded and underwater. But apparently, it's been done, rarely. Usually as some kind of extreme display, like carving your initials into a lightning bolt during a thunderstorm, just to prove you can. You return to your iron shard. The groove still holds, still dark. A little rough at the edges now, but that's normal. Over time, the soot settles. Some even reapply it later. A kind of Viking touch-up session. Soot salons, if you will. You ask Tooth Guy if he's ever done a full set. He grins. 9 teeth, both rows. Had to stop because I couldn't chew oats. He doesn't seem remotely disappointed. If anything, he looks smug. Of course, not everyone agrees that it's about style. One older warrior, a man who smells deeply of onions and regrets, claims the grooves are meant to confuse spirits. When you die, he says, poking at the air, they see your teeth and can't tell who you are. Or maybe they think you're already dead, like a walking corpse. Clever, eh? You nod because disagreeing with a man holding a battle axe is a poor life choice. Still, the idea isn't completely outlandish. Many cultures altered their bodies for spiritual reasons. Scars, piercings, even file-sharpened teeth, all meant to align the body with divine symbols or fend off evil. And let's be honest, if you're already getting your mouth carved with a fish spine file, it might as well keep a ghost from eating your soul. There's another theory whispered around the campfire, a little less mystical and a little more strategic. It goes like this. Imagine you're in a raid. It's chaos, screaming, smoke, blood, all the good stuff. You grab someone by the beard, they snarl, and you see grooved teeth. What do? You back off, because that means something. Maybe it says they've killed before. Maybe it marks them as high status or cursed or both. The carvings become a message, not in words, but in enamel. And that kind of silent communication, powerful. You watch another carving session. This one goes wrong. Mid-score, the subject flinches. The needle slips. A diagonal cut where there shouldn't be one. Tooth Guy swears under his breath. The man getting carved doesn't look thrilled, but also doesn't seem like he's going to cry about it. They decide to turn it into a double. Add a second groove. Cover the mistake with more ink. You make a mental note. Viking carving, like Viking poetry, occasionally improvises. By nightfall, the camp is humming with chatter. People comparing grooves, soot mixes, pain stories. Someone offers to swap 2 goat hides for a tooth touch-up. Someone else is trying to invent a dye made from crushed berries instead of soot, because purple teeth are more intimidating. You aren't sure whether that's genius or insanity, but as you sit beneath a sagging hide awning, chewing resin, rubbing your tongue against the tiny canyon on your tooth, you feel something quietly shift. You're no longer just a visitor. You're etched, marked, part of something that doesn't need a name to exist. Your reflection in the iron shard grins back, a little darker, a little stranger, a little more Viking. You wake to the sound of chanting, not loud, not frenzied, just low and rhythmic, like someone humming to the bones of the earth. The fire has long died out, and a fog has rolled in from the sea, clinging to everything with a damp insistence. It smells of wet wool, salt, and soot. Tooth Guy isn't in his usual spot. Neither are the soot pots. Instead, a circle has formed near the edge of the camp, not far from the burial mounds. Someone is getting their 3rd tooth carved, but not for style this time. It's a funeral. You shuffle closer. The chanting grows clearer, phrases in Old Norse that slide off the tongue like old stones rolling through a stream. There's a body on a slab, arms crossed, mouth slightly open. You catch a glimpse of dark grooves on the front teeth, 3 deep soot-stained cuts that glow faintly in the firelight. The carving isn't fresh. These marks were made long ago. But Tooth Guy is here anyway, crouched near the head, applying a final soot line to the edge of the left canine. A farewell edition. Ritualistic. Someone mutters, to make sure he speaks clearly to the gods. Whether that's real theology or just Viking bedside etiquette is unclear. But it's your first glimpse into the deeper purpose of these carvings, beyond fashion or intimidation. Maybe, just maybe, these marks are also about legacy. About making sure someone knows you were here, long after you're gone. Historians still argue whether these carvings had religious significance. Some claim they were tied to Odin worship, part of arcane rites meant to bridge this world and the next. Others scoff, pointing to the lack of written proof. But as you watch soot get gently applied to the mouth of a dead man, it's hard not to believe it means something. The ceremony ends quietly, a simple burial, a pile of rocks. No fanfare, just soot, silence, and the smell of damp earth. Back at camp, you sit by the dying embers of a new fire, thinking about the strange duality of it all. Tooth carving is brutal, yes, but also intimate, personal, almost sacred, like a prayer whispered in blood and ash. Later, Tooth Guy drops beside you again. He smells like smoke and goose fat. Want to see the weird one? He asks, as if this is a completely normal bedtime offer. You nod, of course. From a leather roll, he unwraps a tooth, not from a skull, but clearly detached. Clean, white, gleaming with unnatural polish. On it, 5 crisscross lines, almost like runes, except they don't match any runic alphabet you recognize. He holds it between his fingers like a relic. Found this in Gotland, dug up from under a burnt ship, still had the soot on it, almost like it was meant to survive. You lean in. The grooves are fine, delicate, not the usual battle lines or bold marks. This is something else, something coded. There's a theory, he whispers, that some of us hid messages in our teeth. You blink. Messages? Imagine this, he says, eyes glinting. You're captured, tortured, but you can't talk, so instead you show them a tooth code. Maybe your name, maybe your tribe, or maybe the location of the gold they'll never find. You try to smile, but it comes out a little wobbly, partly because your jaw still aches, mostly because that idea just rewired your brain. So maybe the carvings aren't just decoration or ritual. Maybe they're also ancient security systems, Viking encryption, dental runes. It seems ridiculous. And yet here's this tooth, still marked, still whispering across centuries. You ask Tooth Guy if he's ever tried to crack the pattern. He laughs. I'm not a scholar, I'm a scraper. But one time I copied the grooves onto a piece of bone and gave it to a monk. What happened? He screamed. Fair. You settle back, suddenly aware of every person in the camp who has grooved teeth. How many of them carry secret meanings? Are there patterns you've missed? What if the placement of grooves, left side, right side, means something specific? Birth order, ship rank, number of raids? There's a boy nearby with one single horizontal groove on a back molar. Tooth Guy says he carved it himself, using a fishbone and a prayer. Said it was for his sister, who died in childbirth. Carving as mourning. Another man has twin diagonal lines on each side, almost like strike-throughs. He believes in forgetting, someone says. Those lines are names he's erased. You're beginning to understand. Viking tooth carving is not just one thing, it's dozens of things. A language with no dictionary, a ritual with no priest, a tattoo you wear inside your mouth. There's a soft lull in the camp now. Most fires are embers. The wind has shifted. Less salt, more damp grass and old wood. Someone sings quietly near the edge of the tents. Not a war song, a lullaby. You roll over, feeling the tiny ridge of your carved tooth against your tongue again. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just exists, like a scar that forgot it once came from pain. The tooth with 5 lines still haunts your thoughts. You wonder who wore it, what it said, whether they meant someone, maybe even you, to find it. But for now, you close your eyes, soot-stained dreams curling behind your eyelids like smoke trails. And maybe, just maybe, if you ever carve another tooth, you'll think about the message it carries. Because now, you know there's more to the mark than meets the bite. You wake with a mouth full of ash and your tongue glued to the roof of your mouth like it's trying to escape. The morning fog has lifted and the light is sharp, silver blue, bouncing off puddles and polished shields. A raven croaks overhead and you groan because even birds in this place sound judgmental. Tooth Guy is already up, of course. You half suspect he doesn't sleep at all, just curls up in a barrel of soot like a cat with issues. Today, though, he's not carving, he's teaching. A small circle of younger Vikings, boys mostly, but a few girls too, are hunched over tusks and sheep teeth, practicing on discarded enamel. Each one clutches a tiny, needle-sharp tool made from fishbone or bird claw, their faces twisted in intense concentration like they're solving a riddle in Morse code. You wander closer, chewing a bit of resin to wake up your jaw. Tooth carving school, someone mutters beside you. Better than getting stuck cleaning the pig pens. You believe them. Sort of. Turns out the art of Viking tooth carving isn't passed down through Grand Master Apprentice ceremonies. It's more like learning to whittle. You get a stick, a blade, and a warning not to stab your thigh. The rest is practice, pain, and patience. Tooth Guy gestures to one of the students. This one's working on a double groove fang, symbol of loyalty. The kid doesn't look particularly loyal, more like he's contemplating chewing on the tool out of frustration, but you nod solemnly. You're handed a goat molar. It's yellow with 2 solid roots, and you're told to etch a warning. That's the assignment. Not a name, not a symbol, just a warning. You don't ask what kind. That would ruin the poetry. You scratch a jagged zigzag into the surface, almost like a lightning bolt, then shade it with soot. It looks angry, mean. a tiny storm caught in enamel. Tooth Guy peers over your shoulder and grunts. Not bad. Angry goat energy. You beam. Later, you're taken to the edge of the camp where an older carver, stooped with a beard that brushes his belt, is sharpening tools on a rock. His fingers are stained dark, his nails blackened at the tips. He has grooves in every visible tooth. Legend, someone whispers. He doesn't speak much, just taps out rhythms with his bone file as he works. Tap, tap, scratch, tap, scratch, grind. It's almost musical. According to Tooth Guy, this man once carved an entire myth into his molars. Not words, just marks, dots, grooves, slashes, a timeline of violence, love, and vengeance encoded in dental shorthand. Historians still argue whether Viking tooth carvings were meant to be read like writing. Some believe they formed a primitive language, perhaps tied to runes. Others argue it's projection, that we're so used to reading meaning into symbols that we see codes where there were only aesthetics. But if the old man's mouth tells a story, it's the kind you'd never read aloud. You'd whisper it behind your hand in the dark after too much mead. At lunch, you're handed smoked fish wrapped in seaweed, and someone warns you to chew with the left side of your mouth. The carvings can crack if you bite down too hard. Apparently, one unfortunate soul lost a chunk of canine on a walnut and had to explain to his lover why he was suddenly missing his intimidation groove. Still, accidents don't stop the enthusiasm. In the afternoon, the young students are set loose to carve their own first tooth. There's nervous laughter, a few yelps, and one fainting incident. You watch one girl, probably 13, carve a small, perfect dot in the center of her incisor. No groove, just a single, soot-filled point. Marker of silence, she says softly. For my brother, he drowned without a word. You don't respond. You just nod. The air feels heavier now. The sun drops lower and shadows stretch across the training grounds like lazy wolves. A few carvers swap tips near the fire. Always carve with the grain, someone says. Always support the jawbone. Never carve angry. You raise an eyebrow at that last one. It makes the line shake, Tooth Guy explains. You'll end up carving your temper instead of your meaning. You file that away, along with the idea that your molars are apparently mood diaries now. Back at the tent, someone challenges you to guess meanings behind a few old carvings. It's a little game they play, tooth reading, like palm reading, but way more awkward if you get it wrong. One man has 3 parallel lines. You guess 3 brothers. He laughs. 3 kills, boars, not men. His wife rolls her eyes like she's heard the story 1,000 times. Another woman shows you a spiral carved into a back molar. Storm at sea, you say. She nods. The one that took my father. It's less a game than a memory parade, but you play anyway, because more and more you realize these aren't decorations, they're identity. Your history etched into enamel, a way to carry your truths with you, even when you lose your home, your name, or your mind. The younger kids practice on tusks into the evening. Some of them will carve their own teeth tomorrow. Others will wait, but each one now holds a little groove in their mind, ready to be etched in real enamel when the moment's right. And when Tooth Guy crouches beside the fire, filing a chicken bone just to keep his fingers moving, you finally ask him the question that's been bothering you. Why teeth? He shrugs. Always with you. Can't lose them. Well, until you die. A pause. And then the story goes with you. You touch your groove. It feels deeper now. Not physically, just spiritually. Like it's begun to settle into your bone. Tomorrow you'll help carve someone else. Pass on what little you know. Add your line to their line. Join a quiet lineage of soot and scratch. And maybe someday, centuries from now, someone will find your jaw in the dirt, peer at the grooves, and wonder what secrets you carried. But for tonight, your tooth still whispers. a tiny voice in the dark, and it's not done talking yet. You're up before dawn, because apparently Viking life has no concept of snooze button. The sky is the color of wet tin, and the air smells like moss and seaweed and regret. You sit up, stretch your sore jaw, and realize something strange. Today's the day you carve someone else's tooth. Tooth guy hands you a kit wrapped in seal hide. Inside, one bone scraper, one soot tin, one tiny wooden mallet, and a strip of seal gut for flossing out shavings. You blink at the last part. "Just don't swallow it," he mutters, already walking away. Your first client is a teenage boy named Egil, who looks like he hasn't smiled since birth. He wants 2 vertical grooves on his front teeth. "One for my first raid," he says. "One for the next." You crouch, brush soot across his tooth like a whisper, and begin. The bone tool vibrates in your hand. You go slow, breathing with each motion, pretending you don't hear Egil clenching his fists in the dirt. And then, it's done. The lines are straight, dark, confident. You wipe away the excess soot, and Egil checks his reflection in the back of a polished shield. He nods once, doesn't say thank you, just walks away like he always had those grooves, like you carved history instead of enamel. Welcome to the club. Across the camp, others are being carved too. It's Tooth Day. An older man sits cross-legged while 2 younger ones argue over the best angle for a diagonal slash. A woman with 4 existing lines wants a 5th to mark the birth of her daughter. One boy carves a perfect triangle onto his own molar using a tiny shard of obsidian. No help, no ceremony, just pain and precision. Tooth Guy watches all this with a half smile. Once the idea gets in, he says, it spreads like fire in dry thatch. You ask if it's always been like this cultural wildfire of carving. He shrugs. Some years, no one touches a tooth. Then someone important carves one, and suddenly the whole fjord's scraping away. Historians still argue whether the tooth carving trend was isolated or widespread. Some claim it was unique to a small warrior caste in southern Sweden, while others insist it reached across Viking society from chieftains to common raiders. But archaeological finds show it popping up far apart. Denmark, Gotland, even parts of England. There's even one odd case, a skeleton unearthed in Dublin with a single groove dated to the Norse Gaelic period. Theories abound. Was it a captured Viking, a local convert, or just one Dublin guy who got very into Norse fashion? But while the historians squabble, Tooth Day unfolds in the living present. At one tent, someone's carving lightning bolts onto their lower incisors to ward off Thor's boredom. At another, a woman carefully dots her canine with a tiny 6-pointed star. She claims it's to represent the 6 people she's outlived. The others look away, suddenly very interested in their fish stew. Your next client is different. She's not a warrior or a widow or a youth in search of status. She's a weaver. Soft hands, gentle voice. She sits quietly, opens her mouth and says, "I want a thread." A thread? Just a fine line curving like thread through cloth. You try. Slowly. The tooth's bone doesn't like curves. But with a steady hand, you scratch out a soft arc, almost like a smile trying not to be noticed. When it's done, she touches it with her tongue, then places a folded piece of cloth in your palm. So you remember. You don't ask what it means. Some carvings aren't for sharing. Some are simply stitched into existence. By midday, the camp is buzzing with carved teeth and post-carving grimaces. People slurp fish broth, grinning crookedly, comparing marks like battle scars. There's pride in the pain. You start to see patterns, families with matching designs, friends with mirror grooves. One group of 5 brothers each has a single notch in a different tooth. Put them together and they form a jagged pattern like shark jaws, a kind of wearable unity. Even pets get in on it. One dog, huge, slobbery, absolutely uninterested in cultural significance, has a soot dot on its fang. You ask if it's real. Nah, someone laughs. Just decoration. He bit a priest once, so we honored him. Tooth Guy carves one last groove for the day, a tiny crescent nestled at the base of his molar. You ask what it means. Means I'm still here, he says. You stare. It's simple and a little beautiful. You carve your own second mark that evening. No fanfare. Just a short line crossing your first groove, turning it into an X. You don't say why. You don't have to. The feeling curls under your ribs and lodges there. It stings, but in a good way. Later, someone begins carving a wooden board with replicas of their tooth patterns. A kind of record, etched in pine instead of jaw. You help sketch yours onto the surface, your hands suddenly shy. The board fills up. Spirals, notches, slashes, dots. It looks like a secret alphabet, a silent song. You lie down beside it that night, watching the stars blur through tired eyes, your jaw still humming from the scrape. You think about how these grooves might outlast your voice, your face, maybe even your name. But your tooth, it'll be telling your story for centuries. You wake to a sound that no Viking camp ever wants to hear. Absolute silence. Not the comforting hush of sleep or the sleepy mutter of someone snoring through a beard. No, this is sharp silence, suspicious silence. The kind of silence that crouches right before something explodes. You people are already moving, fast but quiet, gathering weapons, glancing toward the fjord. A boat was spotted offshore in the pre-dawn mist. Sleek and unfamiliar, its carved prow grinning like a wolf with too many teeth. No one says attack. They don't need to. You slip out of your tent, teeth still aching from yesterday's carvings, heart racing. You're not sure whether you're ready for battle or just worried your groove might chip if you get punched in the jaw. The boats on the beach are already being prepped. Oars lined, shields strapped to the sides, axes counted like nervous prayers. You find Tooth Guy crouched by a crate, stuffing his carving tools into a waterproof pouch. You don't fight? You ask. He gives you a look. I keep people's stories in their heads. Doesn't help if mine gets split open. Fair point. And yet, just before the warriors set off to intercept the mystery vessel, something odd happens. They gather in a circle, men, women, younger fighters barely old enough to swing a sword, and bare their teeth. Not in a snarl, not in a grin, but in quiet unity. Tooth Guy walks the circle, touching each chin, checking grooves. No words, just acknowledgement. You stand with them. You show your X mark. In that moment, the tooth carvings feel less like a trend and more like a code. Not to intimidate, not to decorate, but to belong. Historians still argue whether the carvings were a marker of status or community. Were they earned like battle scars or chosen freely like hairstyles? The evidence contradicts itself. Some graves show high-ranking warriors with no carvings. Others show common raiders marked like sacred texts. But here today, they're a quiet badge, a signal of shared memory, shared grit. The boat offshore turns out to be friendly. Just a merchant from Gotland, his hull packed with dried herring and extremely sarcastic geese. He trades news, mead, and a bag of blue glass beads, then rows off before nightfall. But the moment lingers. Tooth Guy calls a gathering by firelight. Not a feast, something quieter, more sacred. He says the words slowly, like he's grinding them from stone. We carve not just what has happened, he begins, but what we carry. The rage, the loyalty, the grief, the joke that only two people understood. He gestures at the youngest apprentice, a child with a single dot on his tooth. Even the things we're too afraid to say out loud. A hush. Even the geese shut up. Tooth Guy then opens a small leather pouch and pulls out a carved ivory tooth. Not real, but a replica engraved with loops and notches that seem almost like writing. He holds it out like it's something holy. "This is from my brother, died 5 winters ago. Took his real teeth with him, but left this." You take it, turn it in your hand. The grooves are deep, confident. You swear you feel warmth radiating off it like old firewood. Then he passes it to the next person. Around the circle it goes. Each person holds it, closes their eyes, then lets go. Nobody tries to read it. Nobody tries to guess its meaning. It just is. You think about your own carvings. One groove, then an X. Simple, but already heavy. What would you add next? A dot for someone you've lost? A slash for something you regret? A spiral for the thing you still hope for, even if it's small? A woman beside you carved something new into her tooth that very night, alone, by the edge of the fire, with a tool she made herself. She doesn't flinch. She doesn't announce it. But in the morning, her smile has changed. Tooth Guy nods at her, just once. That day, the training shifts. Less about technique, more about intention. Carving is easy, he tells the class. Meaning is the hard part. You practice on walrus tusk, trying to mimic the groove patterns you saw in the replica tooth. It's harder than it looks. Your hand cramps. The line warps. You curse under your breath, then laugh, because now your mistake looks like a river. So you lean into it, make it flow across the curve of the tusk like a path that never quite leads home. Mistakes, Tooth Guy says, are part of it. Even real teeth have cracks. You carve with them. That night, as you lie on your back staring at the dark tent ceiling, your tongue keeps drifting to the mark on your tooth. There's a tenderness there now. Not pain exactly, just awareness. A little reminder of something personal, unspoken. You wonder how many others are lying in their tents right now, doing the same thing, tongue to groove, silently remembering or forgetting, depending on what they need. Because the carvings aren't always meant to last. Some fade. Some get lost in broken jaws or burial mounds. Some are taken by the sea. But for now, they're here, with you, speaking a language that no one taught but everyone understands. In the end, the teeth aren't about war or fear or even tradition. They're about memory, etched in pain, carried in silence. And maybe that's the oddest, gentlest thing about it all. You wake to rain. It taps against the tent like a lazy drummer, steady and soft, like it's trying to remind you that the world outside the camp still exists. Mud, moss, gray sky, and all. You sit up slowly. Your jaw's not as sore anymore, but the groove under your tongue still gives a soft pulse when you press your tongue to it. Outside, the camp is quieter. Not solemn, just slower. Rain has a way of washing away urgency. You find Tooth Guy standing under a lean-to, sipping something herbal from a horn cup. He doesn't say good morning, just hands you a second cup and points to the woods. "Let's walk," he says. You walk. Wet grass brushes your ankles. Pine needles soften the trail. The scent of damp earth is everywhere, rich and heavy, like breath that's lived too long inside a helmet. You ask him where you're going. He just hums and shrugs. To see something. This is your life now. Following a tattooed Viking tooth artist into the forest during a gentle rain. 0 red flags. After a while, the trees thin out and you find yourself at the edge of a small clearing. It's ringed with standing stones, waist high and worn, each one marked with grooves. Not runes, not patterns. Teeth. Tiny carved replicas of human teeth, shaped in clay or bone or soft wood, and then set into the stone like offerings. Tooth graves, Tooth Guy says. You're not sure what that means. He explains that some Viking communities had a custom. If a warrior died without family to bury them, or if they perished far from home, someone would carve a replica of their teeth and place it here, under these stones. Not always a whole mouth, sometimes just a single tooth. One groove, one memory, one person. Your breath catches in your throat. You kneel to get a closer look. One of the tiny replicas has a star etched into the enamel. Another has a pair of lines that intersect, like the X on your own tooth. You feel something twist in your chest. Some of these are hundreds of years old, Tooth Guy murmurs, replaced and recarved over time. Most of the names are lost, but the marks remain. You ask if this was a common practice. He sighs. Historians still argue whether these kinds of tooth shrines were real or symbolic. Maybe just a myth passed between carvers, like a bedtime story with a bone chisel. Some claim the stones are just field markers or ritual altars, but I believe this place remembers. You do too. You help him clear moss off one of the stones, brushing your fingers over the tiny curves and indents. The rain doesn't wash these marks away. If anything, it sharpens them, makes them glisten. Tooth Guy pulls something from his pouch, a small tooth-shaped bead made of carved birch. He doesn't explain, just kneels, places it in an empty notch in the stone, and presses it down with a fingertip. You don't ask who it's for. The walk back is quiet, not sad, just full. Back at camp, things are almost cheerful again. People are drying clothes, swapping stories, carving more friendly designs onto teeth and wood alike. One warrior adds a wavy groove to his incisor to celebrate his 5th successful fishing trip. The eel didn't bite me this time, he says, like that's a perfectly normal milestone. Another girl insists on getting a pair of grooves shaped like tiny fangs. When you ask what they mean, she grins and says, "I like scaring the geese." The geese do, in fact, look slightly more judgmental around her now. That evening, Tooth Guy gathers a handful of the newer apprentices and begins teaching them how to make replicas like the ones at the shrine. You join in, shaping soft soapstone into molar forms, then carving tiny lines into their surface with a shard of bone. Each piece you finish feels like holding someone's breath. A fragment of a whisper turned into something solid. One boy asks, "Do we bury these?" "Tooth graves are for the dead," Tooth Guy says. "These are for remembering." You think about how thin the line is between those two. He teaches a new technique, how to carve with the grain of the tooth, not against it. You can't actually see the grain, but it's there, like wood or bone. The tool glides easier when you follow the tooth's natural path. Every tooth is shaped by the mouth it lived in, he says, just like people. One girl accidentally breaks her replica in two. She looks devastated. But Tooth Guy just takes the halves, smooths the edges, and carves a groove on each. Now they belong to each other, he says. It's all strangely comforting and a little surreal. That night, by firelight, you sit with your own half-finished replica in your lap, wondering what mark to carve. You think of your first groove, the X, the weaver's thread, the shrine, the weight of a memory that isn't fully yours. You press your carving tool to the stone tooth and start scratching, slow and careful. You're not sure what the pattern will become, but your hand seems to know more than your head. Eventually, it's done. You hold it up, turn it in the firelight, and feel something shift. You're not just a visitor anymore, not just an observer. You've been woven into something, small, specific, slightly absurd, but real. Your mark now exists outside your mouth, and tomorrow you might place it under the mossy edge of that stone shrine. Or you might not, because this mark isn't just about death or legacy or Viking identity. It's about being here, alive, present, chewing fish stew with rain in your boots and soot in your smile. And if that's not oddly gentle, you don't know what is. You wake to singing, not a choir or anything angelic. This is more of a lopsided Viking chant, full of throaty growls and occasional laughter. Someone is butchering the lyrics on purpose. It's oddly comforting. You roll out of your bedroll, groggy and sore in the jaw. Even your dream had toothache. But when you smile at your reflection in a puddle, the groove on your tooth catches the light and you feel oddly proud, like you've passed some kind of weird oral rite of passage. Today is market day, and no, not your suburban kind of market with scented candles and suspiciously overpriced sourdough. This is a full-on Norse trading gathering, a temporary sprawl of tents, carts, animals, and smoke that smells like cured meat, sweat, and ambition. The camp has moved down the river to meet up with a larger assembly of clans. Tooth Guy says it's called a thing, which sounds like a placeholder name, but is absolutely real. A Norse thing was both a gathering and a legal assembly, part flea market, part town hall, part chaotic block party with occasional axe throwing. You follow him into the fray. Everywhere you look, there's movement. Fish being bartered for amber, furs being traded for glass beads, a blacksmith hammering out horse bits while three kids argue about whether a goat counts as currency. And there, right between a honey vendor and a tent selling very lucky horse skulls, is the carver's tent. Tooth Guy sets up his bench like it's a sacred altar. Tools laid in precise rows, stones for polishing teeth, scraps of parchment with practice designs. A small wooden sign hangs crookedly. Tooth stories, carved while you wait. You blink. Wait, they're selling these? Like on the spot? Of course, he says. Every mouth has a tale. People begin to gather. A woman with bright orange braids wants 2 dots on her canine to mark the birth of her twins. A grizzled warrior wants to refresh an old pattern that's nearly worn away. He says nothing about what it means, just sits down and opens his jaw like a book he's tired of reading but not ready to close. And then a boy, maybe 10, steps forward with a shy smile and a tiny pouch of copper coins. He doesn't say a word, just points to his front tooth. What story? Tooth Guy asks gently. The boy digs into his tunic and pulls out a little token, a carved wooden cat. My sister gave it to me before she went away on a ship, he whispers. I want it to stay with me. Tooth Guy nods and carves a simple curl, like a cat's tail, onto the surface of the boy's tooth. It's slow, precise work, the kind that makes you forget there's a world beyond the booth. Historians still argue whether Viking tooth carving was performed mostly at home during festivals like this or only during wartime. The archaeological evidence is split. Some carved teeth appear carefully done, as if by professionals, while others seem hurried, rough, as if carved in haste or under duress. But here, it feels like celebration. Between clients, Tooth Guy shows you how to mix the black pigment used to fill in carvings. It's made from soot, crushed charcoal, and a little pine resin, plus a secret ingredient he refuses to name. You make wild guesses. Is it goose droppings? And he doesn't deny it. You end up with a palm stained black and a weirdly satisfying buzz from watching someone choose what part of themselves deserves to be immortalized in a molar. Some requests are joyful. One woman asks for a tiny spiral to celebrate finally winning a wrestling match against her sister. I've lost everyone since we were 6, she admits, grinning. Others are solemn. A man asks for a deep groove to honor a lost crewmate. He doesn't flinch as the tool carves down, and when he walks away, he touches his tooth like it's an amulet. Tooth Guy carves them all. But as the sun dips low, a quiet tension creeps in. A trader from the south has set up across the way, offering glittering jewelry and odd carved charms. And among them he holds up a strange item for all to see, a human tooth, perfectly preserved, drilled with intricate symbols unlike anything you've seen so far. He claims it's from a raider's skull found near Dublin. Real magic, he says with a wink. Wear it, and you'll never drown. The crowd murmurs. Some reach into their coin pouches, others avert their eyes. Tooth Guy watches in silence. Later by the fire, you ask him what he thought. He stares into the flames. Selling a story someone else died with, that's not carving, that's theft. You think about that for a long time. What's the difference between honoring a memory and commodifying it? Between a living tooth that carries meaning and a dead one being hawked to strangers? There's no easy answer. Historians still debate whether some Viking cultures used carved teeth for trade, or if that idea is just a romantic invention. After all, teeth are durable, portable, and loaded with personal value. But were they ever currency? Tooth Guy shrugs. Maybe, but you can't spend what you can't explain. That night, the market winds down. The air smells like old mead and spilled stories. Somewhere, someone is playing a flute badly, and no one tells them to stop. You're back by the tent, polishing carving tools under a sky streaked with smoke and stars, when a stranger walks up. A woman in a cloak too clean for this place, too elegant. She doesn't smile. I heard you tell stories through teeth, she says. Tooth Guy inclines his head. If the story wants to be told. She sits, opens her mouth. Inside, 3 of her front teeth are already marked, deep and old, but there's space beside them, and the look in her eyes says there's something unfinished. You glance at Tooth Guy, but he hands the tool to you. This time, it's your turn. Your hand is steady. The pigment glistens. You don't ask what the mark means. She doesn't offer. But when it's done, she nods, closes her mouth, and vanishes into the dark. You stare at the carving tool in your hand. It's just bone and stone. But tonight it feels like something else. A key, a burden, a quiet kind of power, and it's yours now. You don't sleep much that night. It's not the cold or the noise or even the memory of that last client's eyes, which still linger like smoke. It's the weight of the carving tool beside your bedroll. Too light to notice, too heavy to ignore. At some point, you get up and walk. The camp is quiet, just the crackle of dying fires and the occasional snore from someone who probably dreams about sea dragons and fermented herring. You pass Tooth Guy's tent. He's still awake, sharpening tools by firelight like he's rehearsing for something sacred. You don't interrupt. Instead, you head toward the river. The moon sits low and drowsy above the water, dragging silver threads across the surface. You kneel beside a smooth rock and rinse your hands in the cold stream. As you rub your fingers clean, the groove on your own tooth throbs a little, not painfully, but insistently. Like a drum beat you're finally starting to hear. By the time you return to camp, Tooth Guy is waiting. Couldn't sleep? He asks. You shake your head. He nods toward the forest trail. Good. It's time you learned where this really comes from. So you follow him again. And this time, you go deeper than before, beyond the shrine, past a series of moss-covered boulders shaped like giant molars, which might just be coincidence, but probably isn't, into a place where the air feels thick with old secrets. You arrive at what looks like a collapsed hut, but once you crawl beneath the hanging roots and into the hollow inside, you see the truth. This isn't a ruin, it's a library, but not of books. No scrolls, no ink, just teeth. Dozens, maybe hundreds, embedded into wooden slats dangling from woven cords, arranged in rows like sentences, each one marked, each one a piece of someone's story. This, Tooth Guy whispers, is the archive your breath catches. Some of the teeth are bleached white with age. Others still carry traces of pigment. A few are blackened or cracked, maybe from fire, maybe from time. Each one hums with silence, and together they create a hush so complete it feels like sound in reverse. You ask how long this has existed. No one knows, he says. The carvers kept it hidden, passed down through apprentices. Only those who earned the groove got to see it. You're quiet for a long moment. Then, so why me? He smiles. Because you asked the wrong questions. the real ones. You take a step closer to the nearest row. One tooth has a pattern you recognize, like the one you carved at the market, a tiny cat's tail. But this tooth is older, worn. Its root drilled through so it could be worn like a pendant. Tooth Guy picks it up, holds it in his palm. Most assume these marks were only personal, but there's another layer. Some believe these grooves held coded messages, something shared only between the carvers, a language. Like spy teeth? You whisper, half joking. He chuckles. Maybe. Historians still argue whether Viking tooth markings were part of a secret guild language or just aesthetic choices. The evidence goes both ways, but here, he runs his thumb over the cat's tail. You can almost hear them speaking. You ask if he's decoded any of it. Some. The patterns repeat. Spiral next to star, X beside two dots. It's not random. The meanings shift depending on where the mark is placed. Incisor, molar, left side, upper jaw, like musical notes on different instruments. You try to imagine an entire language built into teeth, not spoken, not written, just worn. And suddenly it doesn't feel far-fetched at all, because isn't that what people do? Leave marks, tiny messages, a scar from a childhood fall, a tattoo for someone gone, a ring worn long after the finger beneath it has changed. Tooth Guy gestures for you to follow him into the back of the archive, where a single long tooth, probably a boar's tusk, is mounted horizontally in the wall. Its surface is grooved end to end, covered in symbols that curl and snake like vines. This is a message, he says, one we still don't understand, carved by a toothsmith over 6 lifetimes ago. Every apprentice tries to decipher it. You lean in close. One symbol catches your eye. It's not exactly like the X on your tooth, but similar. Crossed lines, interwoven. You feel a strange flutter in your chest. What if it's a warning, you ask? Tooth Guy raises an eyebrow, or a song, or a recipe. You laugh, but only a little. Back in the daylight, the forest doesn't seem quite the same. The moss feels watchful. The trees listen differently. You wonder how many people walked these same trails, left their stories in enamel and pigment, and disappeared with only a groove to prove they were ever real. At camp, you sit alone for a while. You roll your own carving tool in your hand. Think about what it means to leave a mark that no one understands yet. That afternoon, Tooth Guy gathers the apprentices for a lesson. He holds up a deer jaw and taps it with a slender rod. Today, we try combinations, he says. You each get a practice tooth and a small patch of pigment. The task: create a mark that says something without saying it. You choose a wavy line inside a triangle. It's not elegant, but it feels right. It feels like something waiting to be remembered. Tooth Guy studies it. That's either a river trapped in a mountain or a fish that regrets everything. You grin? Exactly. Nearby, another apprentice carves 2 diagonal lines that don't quite meet. He says it's for his mother and father, always close, never whole. Another carves a ring of dots around a chipped edge. My lost brothers, she whispers. You look around at these strangers, bonded by bone and boredom, and feel something settle in your chest. You're not here for the art. You're here because the act of carving is a way to say, I was here. This mattered, even if no one remembers why. And when the time comes, maybe one of your teeth will hang from that archive too. Maybe someone will trace the groove and wonder what you were trying to say. Maybe they'll laugh. Maybe they'll listen. Maybe they'll understand. Rain comes softly the next morning, the kind that doesn't bother knocking. It just enters, politely soaks everything, and makes no apologies. The camp stirs slower under its misty gray. Wet wool smells like old dogs. Someone curses as their tent collapses in on itself with a mopey sigh. You're up early, carving tool in hand, half hoping the day will stretch gently, like the rain. But Tooth Guy is already awake, scribbling something with charcoal on a damp board, muttering words in Old Norse that sound like insults but probably aren't. Probably. "We're going on a field trip," he says. You groan. He ignores it. You walk for what feels like hours, through puddles, mud, and meadows that squelch with every step, until you reach a strange clearing marked by tall wooden poles. At the center lies a shallow pit lined with flat stones and blackened bones. It's a cremation site. "Here's where stories end," he says, kneeling by the stones. "But sometimes, not quite." You frown. He lifts a charred piece of something that might have once been jawbone. It's broken, rough, but a single tooth clings on a molar, and on that molar, even through the burn, is the faint trace of a groove. "Still visible," he says softly. "Even after fire, you feel the weight of that. It hits differently. Carving is one thing, but for the marks to survive fire, ash, and time, that's another entirely. It's not just an expression. It's an attempt at permanence." Historians still argue whether Viking cremation rites were meant to destroy identity or preserve it through purification. Some graves include personal artifacts, others are stripped bare. But those teeth, they refuse to let go. Tooth Guy tells you this place used to be a ceremonial grove, not just for endings, but for decisions. They'd bring the bodies here before cremation, not just to burn them, but to question them. You raise an eyebrow. "Ask the dead for answers," he explains. "Sometimes the markings on their teeth were consulted, interpreted, like runes." You stare at the blackened molar in his hand. "Teeth as oracles?" He nods. "Wouldn't be the strangest thing Vikings believed? Remember the sea serpent that encircles the world?" Fair point. You lean closer, trying to make out the shape on the burnt tooth. It looks like a crescent inside a box, or maybe a claw curled around a pebble. You can't tell, and that's the maddening part. You want to understand. The need to decode starts to itch in your bones. Tooth Guy wraps the molar in a strip of linen and tucks it into his pouch. "Some stories come back with us," he says. That evening, as rain continues to fall in a soft hiss, he introduces you to another piece of the puzzle. A stone board covered in carved symbols. It's not Viking in style. It looks older, stranger. The marks are shallower, done with a different hand. "This predates our carvings," he says. "The Sami left marks too, not always in teeth, but in bone. Antler. They told stories with grooves before we did." You touch the board. The surface feels like cooled bread crust, crumbly in places, smooth in others. There's a deep groove shaped like a tree trunk with 3 smaller cuts at the top. "Tooth branches, you offer." He grins. "Could be, or it might mean ancestor line, or do not eat this bone." You get used to the uncertainty. Historians still debate how much influence the indigenous Sami had on Viking ritual practices, especially in the far north. Some scholars believe the Vikings borrowed sacred symbolism and carved it into their own bones, literally. Others think it's a case of parallel evolution. Either way, the overlap is there. As the fire crackles low and your fingers trace grooves that haven't been touched in centuries, you find yourself wondering how many hands have done the same, how many eyes squinted at this same symbol, how many mouths spoke theories into the smoke, trying to coax meaning from silence. Later, while everyone else sleeps, you sit with the carving tool in your lap. You reach up to your own groove, the one on your tooth, and gently run your tongue over it. Still there, still solid, still yours. And suddenly, you want to carve again. You find a scrap of antler from earlier practice, just a nub, barely the length of your thumb. But enough. This time you don't plan, you don't sketch, you just carve. A spiral beside a cross, a mark like a falling leaf, a zigzag between 2 dots. It doesn't mean anything, or maybe it means everything. You don't know yet. When you finish, you set it beside your sleeping mat, not to show anyone, Not yet, just to know it's there. The next morning, someone notices. One of the younger apprentices picks it up and tilts their head. Is this a code? You shrug. They turn it in their fingers like it's a puzzle box. I think it means storm passing. You smile. Could be. Tooth Guy just watches from the shadows, nodding slowly. At breakfast, he tells a story about a warrior who carved the name of his lost ship into his molar, then jumped off a cliff during a raid rather than let the enemy capture him. The enemy found his body and buried it in silence. But years later, his tooth was found by someone who read the ship's name and told the story again. That's the power, Tooth Guy says. A groove is just a whisper waiting for the right ear. You think about that all day. Later, Tooth Guy pulls you aside with a new task. Time for your first commission, he says. Someone's requested you specifically. Your stomach flips. Why? He smiles. Because you carved what they couldn't say themselves. You gulp. The client is a woman, maybe 40, with a gaze like a hawk's and a mouth that's missing a few back teeth. She's quiet, but she hands you a carved pendant with a symbol you recognize. It matches the spiral from your practice antler. I want that, she says, on this one. She points to a sharp canine. You sit down, sharpen your tool, steady your breath, and carve. Your hands don't shake. Your groove is clean. The pigment settles neatly into the cut. When it's done, she runs her tongue over the mark and smiles. You understood, she says, and walks away. You stand there, the carving tool still warm in your fingers, and for the first time, you feel it. You're not just learning, you're becoming. Your first real commission doesn't change everything immediately, but it changes you. Something subtle shifts, like a new groove in your own enamel. You wake the next morning and walk differently. Not with swagger. No, that would be far too Viking of you, but with a quiet sort of weight. The kind people notice, especially the other apprentices. One of them, a lanky boy with too many teeth for his own mouth, watches you warily over breakfast. He's been there longer than you, carved more teeth, spilled more pigment. And now, he's not the one being requested. Nice groove, he mutters as you pass. You thank him sweetly, like a dripping icicle. Tooth Guy watches the whole exchange without comment. He just sips his drink, which might be tea or just moss in hot water, and nods toward the carving station. You spend the morning tracing old grooves for practice. Some are thin as hairlines, others wide as thumbprints. You're learning to feel the emotion in the cut, the weight behind each line. A happy mark moves differently than a sorrowful one. Anger bites deeper. Hope skips. Every groove has a rhythm, Tooth Guy says. Your job is to find it and not mess it up. You chuckle, but inside you know what he means. There's a pulse in these teeth, even when they're long dead. By midday, more clients come. Not all want carvings. Some just want to show you their grooves. Ask what you see. It becomes a game. A man with a triple X on a molar. You tell him it looks like a fire barrier. He grins and says, close, it's for my 3 dead X's. You are no longer surprised by Viking humor. Another woman has a perfect ring around her front tooth. To remind me not to speak too soon, she says, and refuses to explain further. You nod, respectfully, and maybe a little afraid. And then there's a child. He's maybe 10, missing more teeth than he has. Freckles, wide eyes, and the posture of someone who's had to grow up too fast. He doesn't say much, just holds up a small pendant made of carved bone. The symbol is a broken line with 2 dots underneath. I want this, he whispers, for my brother. You ask if he wants to tell you what it means. He shakes his head. It's just ours. So you carve it, carefully, quietly, into the side of his canine. He doesn't flinch. When it's done, he touches it like he's checking a heartbeat. Now I won't forget, he says, and runs off. You sit there for a moment, your fingers still tingling from the cut. There's something sacred in this silent understanding between carver and client, like being a priest who only speaks in grooves, no sermons, just marks. Tooth Guy leans over and murmurs, "You're starting to get it." You nod. You don't say a word. Later that day, he takes you aside. "There's something I've been meaning to show you," he says. You follow him again, always into some part of the forest that smells like time itself. This time, it's an old path, nearly invisible under fallen leaves and damp moss. The air tastes like roots and memory. At the end of the trail is a tree. No ordinary tree, of course. It's massive, twisted, half dead, half alive. Its trunk is carved from base to crown, not with symbols, but with grooves. Deep, deliberate grooves, spiraling like climbing vines. You reach out and touch it. The bark is cool, ridged. Each groove fits a fingertip perfectly. "This," Tooth Guy says, "is the memory tree." You raise an eyebrow. "Okay, dramatic." He smiles. You're not wrong, but it's also true. Each generation of carvers adds their mark. Not names, just feelings, moments, things they can't say aloud. You ask what it all means. He shrugs. No one knows anymore, but when storms come, the tree hums. He places your palm flat against the bark, and you feel it. A tremor, faint but real, like breath in a sleeping giant. The grooves sing in their own way, not loud, but steady, as if the marks left behind have woven themselves into the fibers of the tree, and the tree remembers them all. Historians still argue whether such carving trees existed among Viking communities, or whether this is just a romantic invention of later centuries. But then again, those historians haven't stood here with their hand pressed to a humming trunk listening. Tooth Guy says nothing more. He just carves a single new line into the base of the tree. Not deep, just enough. Then he steps back and waits. You understand. You take your tool and add your own. The moment is quiet. Rain starts again. The tree doesn't flinch. You walk back to camp in silence. That night you dream not of raids or gold or screaming glory, but of grooves. Endless grooves across landscapes of bone and bark and stone, all humming the same low song. We were here. We meant something. We still do. You wake before sunrise. You carve that feeling onto your own scrap of antler. Don't even realize what you're doing until it's done. A looping mark like wind around a fire. No one else will know what it means, but you will. And that's enough. At breakfast, Tooth Guy slides a bone across the table. Big test tomorrow. You blink. What kind? He grins. The kind with blood. You choke on your stale bread. It's a live subject, he says. You drop the bread. He laughs. Not that kind of blood, just someone who moves. You don't know whether to feel relieved or terrified, but either way, you keep your carving tool close that night. You lie awake longer than usual that night. The fire has gone to glowing coals. Outside, some owl is busy interrogating the moon, and your breath fogs faintly in the chill. Your fingers keep brushing the carving tool beside your mat, just to check it's still there, as if it might wander off in the dark and carve something without you. Tomorrow is the live subject test. You don't ask Tooth Guy what that means again. He said it wouldn't be that kind of blood, but you've seen how Vikings throw around reassurances. Only a little raid, just a splash of poison, minor axe wound. Define minor, Jorund. At dawn, you're led down to the river. It glints like steel beneath a pale sky. Mist drifts along its surface like half-finished thoughts. You squint into the fog and see her, your subject. She's standing barefoot in the shallows, arms folded, scowling like someone who once fought a bear and won, but still didn't get a decent meal afterward. This is fiercest, Tooth Guy says, clearly enjoying your panic. She's agreed to let you do a ceremonial groove. You open your mouth. No words come out. You try again. Still nothing. Freydis narrows her eyes. Don't worry, Carver. I bite softer than I look. Not reassuring. But she sits anyway, right on a mossy rock. Opens her mouth, points to her lower left molar. You peek inside. It's pristine, like a little blank wall, daring you to mess up. Just one line, she says. Diagonal, from corner to corner, sharp as a blade. Think of it like a scar. You nod, swallow, and crouch down. The carving tool rests lightly in your grip, but your hand is anything but steady. Freydis watches you the whole time, not moving, not flinching. You make the first incision. The tool bites into enamel, and suddenly time slows. This is different. On bone or bark, the material waits. But here, with a living human, everything responds. The twitch of a muscle, the breath caught in her throat, the slight clench of her jaw as you dig a little too deep. You keep your hand steady. You find the rhythm. It's like carving into storm-stilled water. The pigment you use is dark red, thickened with ash. It sinks into the line like ink into old paper. Freydis swishes her mouth, nods once and stands. That'll do, she says. Feels like truth. She walks off before you can ask what that even means. You sit there, heart pounding like you just wrestled a bear too. Tooth Guy claps once behind you. Good, you passed. You sigh with relief. Now, he adds, you're ready for something harder. You groan. Back at camp, he lays out a bundle of teeth. Real teeth. Human. Some still carry traces of gums. You will never eat stew again. These were donated, he says, seeing your face. Don't ask how. You eye a canine with what looks suspiciously like lipstick on the root. You definitely don't ask. The task? Recreate carvings that were once used as warnings. Tooth totems, he explains. Worn on necklaces, often around the necks of warriors or scouts. Each groove carried a message. Not just I'm fierce, but more like don't follow me unless you're ready to die screaming. Subtle. He shows you examples. One has 7 sharp vertical cuts with a swirl at the bottom. Historians argue whether this meant avenge 7 brothers or just I've killed 7 people. Both fun at parties. Another has a crooked line with dots on either side. That one, possibly a map, or a joke about a crooked-legged goat. No one agrees. You spend hours trying to replicate the patterns exactly, not just in look, but in feel. If your hand hesitates, the message changes. If you cut too shallow, it whispers when it should shout. You fail a few. Tooth Guy makes you bury those. We don't let weak grooves survive, he says. They confuse the ancestors. That night, you're woken by a noise. Low. Clicking. You sit up. Outside the tent, a shadow crouches by the fire, carving. It's Tooth Guy. You sneak closer. He's not working on teeth. He's carving something into his own thumbnail. Click. Scratch. Click. Scratch. You whisper his name. He glances up, not startled, just tired. I don't sleep well, he mutters. Dreams get loud. You don't know what to say, so you sit beside him. He shows you the mark, a crescent with a bar through it. It's a sigil for forgetting, he says, but it doesn't work. You ask what he's trying to forget. He shrugs. Nothing specific, just the noise, all the old grooves humming at once. You nod. It's not a sound you can hear exactly, but you feel it now, in the air, in your teeth. The camp sleeps. The stars flicker like reluctant witnesses. You know, he says after a long pause, some of the best carvers burned their tools when they were done, not out of shame, but because the tools held memories too. The cut remembers the cutter. You glance down at your own tool. It's nothing special. Wooden handle, iron tip, smooth from use. But it does remember. You can feel that now. The next morning, you wake early and walk alone into the woods. You find a fallen log, sit, and carve a spiral, then a triangle, then a leaf. You don't think, you just move. And when you're done, you dig a small hole, place the carving inside, and cover it with moss. Not for anyone, just so it's there. Tooth Guy finds you later and doesn't say a word. He just hands you a new tooth. It's yours. A blank one, pulled and cleaned. Yours to carry, yours to carve. You're ready, he says, to mark your own story. The tooth sits in your palm like a riddle. It's smooth, ivory white, with just the faintest yellow near the root. A premolar, maybe. Not too big, not too small. The kind of tooth that doesn't shout, but listens. You run your thumb over it again and again, waiting for inspiration to whisper something obvious like, "Mark me with a lightning bolt," or "Honor your ancestors with a tasteful Nordic snowflake." Nothing comes. Tooth Guy watches you with that irritatingly patient expression of his, the one that says, "This took me 10 years, so I hope you suffer appropriately." You ask him how you're supposed to decide what to carve. He shrugs. You already know. You just don't want to admit it. You mutter something rude in your head because you're still very polite aloud. All day the tooth follows you. You tuck it into your sleeve, your satchel, even under your tongue once, just to feel it next to the others. But it doesn't feel like yours yet. That evening, the elders gather by the longhouse fire. There's something ceremonial about the way they sit, arms crossed, silence stretched like tanned leather. You've seen gatherings before, always at a distance, but this time you're invited to kneel at the edge of the firelight. A carved box is passed around. Each elder reaches in and pulls out a tooth, their own, carved long ago. Some wear theirs on necklaces. Others keep them wrapped in fabric. One particularly ancient woman wears 5 across her knuckles like bone brass knuckles. You do not ask questions. When it's your turn, the box is passed to you. You look inside, teeth of all shapes, some bleached pale, others dark with pigment. Each has a groove, some spiral, some cut clean across, some jagged like lightning. One has a circle with a tiny dot in the center, like an eye that never closes. You pick none of them. Just hold your own tighter. One elder asks, "What will yours say?" Another adds, "Not to others, to yourself." Tooth Guy murmurs, "You only get one first groove. No pressure." They watch as you walk toward the carving station. You sit. The room quiets. Even the fire seems to hush, holding its breath in a little orange fist. You take your time. Your fingers know the movements now. But this isn't about skill. It's about truth. You think back to the first groove you saw, that elderly sailor with the faded fang, then the girl with the snake mark, the boy and his brother's symbol, the memory tree, Freitas and her blade-like diagonal, the tooth totems, the thumbnail sigil, and then you begin. A short horizontal line, then 2 vertical cuts beneath it, and finally, a single curl wrapping around the base. It doesn't mean anything in Viking runes. It doesn't need to. To you it means still standing, still listening, still soft. When it's done, you don't breathe. Just hold it up. Tooth Guy gives the smallest nod. The elders pass the tooth around. Each runs a thumb across it. Each closes their eyes briefly, as if tasting the memory inside. When it comes back to you, they say nothing. Just gesture toward the fire. You place it on a flat stone at the fire's edge. Let it warm, let the pigment settle, let the air taste it. And then the oldest among them, the knuckle-toothed woman, speaks. You are now keeper of one groove. The others echo it in a sleepy chant. Keeper of one groove, keeper of one groove. You try to hide your goosebumps. You fail. That night, you don't sleep. Not because of nerves, because you don't want to miss this feeling. Somewhere in the dark, someone begins to hum. Not a tune, just a low, rhythmic hum. It's joined by another and another. Before long, the entire camp is humming together. A lullaby made of breath and teeth and time. You lie back and stare at the stars. They blink at you like a dozen sleepy gods. The tooth is now on a cord around your neck. The warmth from the fire still clings to it. The next morning, you're told to pack. Your apprenticeship here is done. You're stunned. But I just carved my tooth. Tooth Guy grins. Exactly. That means it's time to learn somewhere else. He hands you a small satchel. Inside, pigment pots, carving tools, a few spare blank teeth, and a rolled up map. Your next teacher waits across the fjord. You blink at him. There's another tooth guy? He chuckles. Oh, she's way weirder than me. You don't know whether to be excited or horrified. You hug him, which surprises both of you. He lets it happen, then pulls back and taps your pendant. Don't forget this part. You glance down at the groove. Still standing, still listening, still soft. The boat waits by the water. As you step in, the villagers come to see you off. Even the sour-faced apprentice waves half-heartedly. Freitas throws a chunk of stale bread at your head. You catch it, grin, and bow. The old woman lifts a tooth in salute. The boat creaks, the oars splash once, twice. And then you're floating downriver, the camp shrinking behind you like a fading scar. Ahead, new forests, new marks, new stories. The river wind kisses your cheek. You touch the tooth at your neck and whisper, "Let's see what kind of groove you get next." The fjord narrows as you drift into the mist. Morning stretches lazily across the water, curling up around pine-covered cliffs like a cat around your ankles. You hear gulls overhead, loud, judgmental, possibly drunk. One of them lands briefly on your boat's prow, stares into your soul, then flaps off as if disappointed. You are alone now, except for your tooth. It swings against your chest with each ripple of the boat. A quiet tap-tap against your ribs like a second heartbeat. You start humming again, not the chant from the village, but your own version. You don't even realize you're doing it until a voice from the shore answers. A thin figure stands at the edge of a rocky cove. Wrapped in layers of cloth and leather, they hold a long pole, topped with a strange shape, part weather vane, part tooth. They beckon. You step onto land. The new teacher's name is Yrsa, and she does not smile. Her face looks carved from wind. She gestures for you to follow with one gloved hand, then turns and walks up a steep trail without checking if you're coming. You are. At her workshop, half hut, half cave, you notice immediately there are no teeth hanging anywhere. Instead, the walls are etched with outlines. Tooth shapes, sure, but also animal tracks, runes, and strange knot-like patterns that seem to rearrange when you look away. Yrsa finally speaks. "I teach the grooves that never touch teeth." You blink. She raises an eyebrow. "You think carving teeth is the final form? Child, teeth are just the beginning. The groove is the message. The medium is up to you." She hands you a strip of bark. "Carve the same message you did in your tooth, but make it move." You frown. Move, movement of mind, of meaning, make it dance. You have never felt more lost. Still you sit and you carve, but the spiral is too sharp. The vertical lines don't feel right on bark. The curl at the bottom droops like a wet fern. Yrsa watches. "Wrong," she says. "Try bone." She gives you a deer scapula. You carve again. Still wrong. Try wax. More carving. More wrong. Try shadow. You're not sure that's even possible, but you try. By the fifth attempt, you are ready to eat your tools into the fjord and become a mushroom. But then you stop, close your eyes, and instead of forcing your groove into the new medium, you let the material guide you. In wax, your line becomes a wave. In bone, a flame. In shadow, your fingers make the shape on the cave wall. Your hands move. The groove is there, just implied. Yrsa finally nods. "The groove is not the tooth," she says. "The groove is the truth. Teeth just remember well." You nod slowly. Your truth is starting to travel. That night, you stay awake sketching groove ideas in the dirt with a stick. Circles that split into lines, lines that curl into nothing, runes with no sound, thoughts with no language. Yrsa watches from the shadows. She says, "You should meet the mouthless one." You pause. "The what?" She just nods toward the forest. At dawn, she gives you a pouch. Inside, 7 uncarved teeth, 2 sprigs of juniper, and a piece of moss. You'll need to offer something, she says. The mouthless one listens best when your hands are full. And so you go. The forest hushes behind you as you walk deeper. No birdsong, just the sound of your breath and the occasional snap of twigs beneath your boots. After an hour or so, you reach a hollow in the earth. It's shaped like a jaw, not metaphorically, literally. 2 rows of stones line the sides like teeth, some cracked, some chipped, some smooth. You step into the hollow. The wind stops, you kneel. Take out the pouch, place one of the blank teeth on the moss, add a sprig of juniper, and wait. The ground hums, not loud, just enough to make your ribs tingle. Then you feel it. Not a presence exactly, but a tension. Like the entire earth has leaned just slightly toward you. You whisper your groove, not aloud, but through your fingers. You trace it in the air, then on your palm, then in your breath. The groove lives. The hollow breathes it in. And you know the mouthless one has accepted it. Later, when you return to Yrsa, she looks at you with something like pride. You're ready for the dream grooves, she says. You sit, and she begins to teach. These are the grooves you carve not on teeth or bone or bark, but on memory itself. Historians still argue whether Vikings used dream grooves to record dreams or to cause them, Yrsa murmurs. I say both, but what do they know? She shows you how to make a groove in silence. You carve into your thoughts, mentally tracing patterns so precise they echo days later in your dreams. The first time, you dream of waves. The second time, of stars falling into cups. The third time, of a wolf licking a spiral into the sky. You wake from each one feeling like you've learned something, but the lessons are shaped like questions. And the grooves, still clear in your mind, etched like song lyrics you didn't realize you'd memorized. Yrsa finally gives you a blank stone. Carve the groove you saw last night, she says. You hesitate, then begin. The line curves once, breaks, then resumes in a perfect circle. At the center, nothing. You don't know what it means, but you know it's true. Yrsa takes the stone, buries it beneath the pine tree. That one's not for keeping, she says. Some grooves are only for the land. You nod. Your truth now moves through teeth, bark, wax, bone, shadow, memory, and earth. You are no longer just a carver. You are a groover. Try putting that on a job application. The days with Yrsa grow slow and syrupy. You stop marking time. Instead, you measure your life in grooves. One day, a boy stumbles into the hut, covered in soot, coughing like a chimney. His name is Attar, and he's run from a village burned by raiders. He carries a single thing, his sister's tooth, uncarved. He holds it out to you like a question. Yrsa nods at you. This is now. You and Attar sit by the fire. He says very little. You say even less. You place the tooth between you and ask him gently, what should it say? He stares at it for a long time. Then she laughed like seagulls, and she once sang to a fish until it died. That's enough. You carve a line, then a zigzag, then a tiny swirl like a dying fish tail. It's absurd. It's beautiful. It's hers. You give it back. He weeps. And then the oddest thing, you carve a second groove beside it. Not in the tooth, just on a piece of wax. This one says, witnessed grief. Held it gently. You don't keep it either. You burn the wax. Yrsa watches this and says nothing, but you notice she leaves out an extra cup of tea that night. Later, alone, you look at the teeth still in your pouch. The blanks. They aren't blank anymore. Not really. Each one holds the possibility of a groove. You think of all the places you've been. The village with the tooth totems, the quiet girl with the snake mark, the ancient sailor, tooth guy, the knuckle-tooth elder, Freitas and her blade-swipe grin, Yrsa's silent nod, the hollow in the woods, and now this soot-covered boy who hums when he sleeps. Each person, a groove. Each memory a carving, each truth a soft notch in the jawbone of time. The next morning, Yrsa hands you a bundle, more carving tools, a folded map, a single red feather. She simply says, "Go south." You ask, "Who's there?" Her answer, "You are." You're not sure if that's a metaphor, a prank, or some Viking version of an HR onboarding statement. But you pack. Before you leave, she carves a tooth for you. It's dark, bone black, the groove is tight, almost invisible. You ask her what it means. She just smiles, finally, and says it means you'll forget this, but the tooth won't. You laugh, then cry, then laugh again. You hike down the trail, past the pine where your dream groove sleeps beneath the soil. You walk through shadow and light, fog and sun. Eventually, the fjord widens again. The sky gets bigger. And there, on a cliff above the water, you pause. You pull your tooth pendant into your hand. Still standing, still listening, still soft. You smile. And then you press your thumb to the groove, your first groove, and walk into the world to carve more. Now slow everything down. Your body, your breath, your thoughts, let them melt like old snow in spring. The groove we've walked tonight, through bone and bark and story, has brought you far from where you began. And now your muscles settle, your eyes soften, and your breath curls like smoke rising from a quiet campfire. Picture your own little carving hut now. It's tucked in the trees just beyond memory. The fire's out, but the stones are warm. On the shelf, your tooth, your first groove. Still waiting, still watching you with its quiet, ancient smirk. No need to rush. No need to understand everything. Some grooves are only meant to be felt, not solved. Let your fingers twitch softly, maybe remembering a spiral or a line or the curl of a whisper that never needed words. You did good tonight. You traveled far. You carried truth gently. And now it's time to rest. Let the grooves you've heard curl into dreams. Let the forest hush your thoughts. Let the mouthless wind cradle your cheek with breath older than language. You are still standing. You are still listening. You are still soft. And that is the mark of a true carver. Good night, Groove Keeper. Let the tooth remember for you. End of script. Sweet dreams.